Sayın Bakan Yardımcım, Sayın Başkonsolos, Sayın SETA Genel Koordinatörümüz, kıymetli misafirler, hanımefendiler, beyefendiler. SETA Vakfı tarafından düzenlenen Türkiye-Endonezya Ortaklık Forumu'na hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Bugün burada Türkiye ve Endonezya arasındaki köklü dostluk ilişkilerini güçlendirmek, küresel ve bölgesel gelişmeleri değerlendirmek ve ikili işbirliği alanlarını derinleştirmek üzere bir araya gelmiş bulunuyoruz. Programımızın ilk bölümünde açılış konuşmalarını gerçekleştirmek üzere Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Ticaret Bakan Yardımcısı Sayın Mustafa Tuzcu'nun kürsüye teşriflerini arz ediyorum.
Distinguished guests, a very good morning. Salamat pagi. It's a pleasure, it's a great pleasure to be with you today at this important forum. I thank SETA and also Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the agency for organizing this very precious event. Actually, Indonesia is a special country for me and also, of course, for Turkish people. We do have excellent political and economic relations, and also we do have strong bonds. And we commemorate the 75th anniversary of our diplomatic relations this year. And we are going to see that today, inshallah, with this opening panel, and the continuing to panels are going to be another cornerstone of our growing relations. Our two nations are bound not only by deep historical and cultural ties, but also with a shared aspiration, which is to contribute to a more prosperous and peaceful global future. That's why I tell this, our leaders just were in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt to witness and to lead the peace efforts and to end the genocide in Gaza. They were in Sharm el-Sheikh together, and as always, they stand united as pivotal powers in the Islamic world, echoing a common call for peace and dignity. So it was an important last event. I want to raise that our president was the leaders of this recent initiative. Distinguished guests, beyond our political alignment, our economic collaboration holds, of course, immense promise, especially in the rapidly changing global landscape. It's not a secret, the global economy and global cooperation is not at a good shape. Recently, we have been navigating with profound change and also, of course, a turbulence around us. But also we have to say that we face these significant challenges at the one hand, and also we have opportunities around us, especially when we have our partners, allies with us. Here, in the face of these headwinds, both Turkey and Indonesia, as members of G20, as the founders of D8, these economies continue to demonstrate remarkable resilience, and both countries are on the path to achieve a sustainable and also efficient economic growth. We can see that both countries, under this global pressures, still maintain their growth, which is almost an average around 4% in the last 10 years. It is pretty good when we consider all these problems and challenges around us. As the largest economy in the ASEAN, Indonesia's strategic location makes it a vital hub for international logistics and trade. Of course, in addition to this, moreover, we see that its integration, the increasing integration of Indonesia into the global value chains, especially with the entry into force of RCP, Indonesia's competitiveness and market access opportunities also improved in recent years. This has positioned Indonesia as a regional manufacturing base for global business like Türkiye in recent years. With its vast strength and potential, Türkiye sees Indonesia as a strategic economic partner in Asian Pacific region. And we recognize significant untapped potential between our countries. With a combined population of around 360 million, and also complementary economies totaling around 2.7 trillion, our partnership is poised to deliver value on a global scale. The year 2025, this year, already marks a strategic turning point in this partnership. The historic visits of our President Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdoğan to Indonesia, and also the President Subianto's visit to Türkiye, have injected unprecedented momentum to our relations. I'm very proud to be a part of the visit of our President to Jakarta, which was, I just mentioned, the morning talk with my friends. It was the most impressive visit I attended. I joined with our President. In this regard, we established with these occasions our high-level strategic cooperation council. And also we had signed several agreements in various fields from defense to energy, education, healthcare, in different fields. Esteemed participants, trade, of course, should certainly be the engine of our bilateral partnership in the coming years. For this purpose, our presidents in these visits have set an ambitious, but of course achievable target for us, which is to raise our bilateral trade to 10 billion. Our current trade level is very much low. When compared to this target, it's around 2.8 billion US dollars, but we still believe that it's doable, it's achievable. Of course, a key milestone in achieving this target will be the conclusion of a preferential trade agreement between our countries. This agreement will definitely be a significant step reflecting our shared determination to deliver tangible benefits to both countries. We are also encouraged by the growing footprint of Turkish companies in Indonesia in different sectors. They are not only creating values, but also they strengthening the fabric of our economic ties. So we see them as permanent establishments in Indonesia to advance, to elevate our relations. In the same spirit, we also believe that the recent established Danantara Sovereign Wealth Fund of Indonesia holds a significant promise for enhancing our investment cooperation. We stand ready to explore mechanisms that facilitate our partnership and also reinforce capital inflows between our countries. To sustain this momentum, in coming weeks, we are going to organize a Türkiye-Indonesia Infrastructure Forum in Jakarta, which is going to aim also foster the investment opportunities and sectoral cooperation. I also like to emphasize that enhancing connectivity also is an indispensable part for our relations to boost our trade and investment relations. Therefore, we must work together to increase sea, and air transport connections, and reduce transport connection costs. Here also in the morning, we discussed that there is going to be a also coming meeting with our Minister of Transportation on this. We see this connectivity issue as an important part of our common agenda. Of course, another important area is defense. In the realm of defense and advanced technology, we also have entered a new era. At the recent Indo Defense 2025 Expo, several transformative agreements were signed, and now we are in joint production process plans for different defense industries, including unmanned aerial vehicles, as well as collaborative projects in naval and maritime and also missile systems. Perhaps the most striking and recent project, cooperation project, is the supply of Turkish 5th generation Kaan jet fighters to Indonesia. We view these deals, these agreements, not only merely as export deals. It's not, definitely they are not merely export deals. They are platforms for shared innovation. They are also shared technology and capacity building. Also, we just established a new mechanism between our ministers of foreign affairs and defense together. It's going to be another platform. We are going to discuss the level of cooperation in defense and foreign relations in the same platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, Türkiye and Indonesia are strategic partners. Our bonds are growing across every field. Most importantly, we remain firmly committed to transforming our strategic dialogue and close social ties into high-impact partnerships. With this, I congratulate the 75th anniversary of our diplomatic relations, which have fostered brotherly ties between our peoples over the decades. And also, in conclusion, I also wish you fruitful discussion today, which will certainly help strengthen our bilateral partnership and also definitely guide the government in elevating, advancing our economic and political relations. I thank you.
Konuşmalarından ötürü Sayın Tuzcu'ya şükranlarımızı sunuyoruz. Şimdi de açılış konuşmalarını yapmak üzere SETA Vakfı Genel Koordinatörü Doçent Doktor Sayın Nebi Miş'in kürsüye teşriflerini arz ediyorum.
I would like to speak as a Turkish. I prepared my speech Turkish. Sorry for this. Sayın İstanbul Başkonsolosu Daryanto Harsono, değerli büyükelçiler, diplomatlar, kıymetli akademisyenler ve katılımcılar, öncelikle SETA'da bu event'e geldiğiniz için hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Teşekkür ediyorum. Tabii bugün burada birincisini Hindistan'la, ikincisini Çin ile ve şimdi de üçüncüsünü Endonezya ile gerçekleştirdiğimiz uluslararası
This is the third of the series of our meetings. We are celebrating 75th anniversary of or diplomatic relations between our two countries. I'm very happy to be with you. This is an important turning point for us, not only because of the rooted friendship between our countries, but also it's a reminder of our responsibility for building robust countries and relationships. Throughout the world, uncertainty is ongoing. Many states are undergoing legitimacy crisis, governance, and stability are fluctuating, and the basis of international order are being redefined. Conflicts are ongoing, unfortunately. The war in Ukraine showed us the limits of deterrence and diplomatic solutions. Iran-Israel tensions added to the uncertainty in the region, to the humanitarian tragedy in Gaza, and the genocide leads us to utter sadness. And the Afghanistan-Pakistan tension shows us how vulnerable the balances are. Asia is not free of these fluctuations. The competition between India and Pakistan, and the border tensions between Thailand and Cambodia, and the increasing protests in Southeast Asia indicates the complicated and multi-tiered nature of transformation in the region. Despite this outlook, there are promising developments as well. A potential peace process in Gaza and gradual normalization in Syria indicates that even crisis can harbor dialogue and consensus. So, Turkey and Indonesia have a rooted historical sets of bonds. We are two actors creating and developing stability, peace, justice, development, and multidimensional foreign policies are contributing to the international balance. In recent years, the leaders of both countries visited themselves each other visually, so we have now a strategic momentum in our relations. Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited Indonesia, and in return, the Indonesian President Republic Turkey, which resulted in new partnership horizons in defense, energy, and economy. The fifth generation fighter jet is the subject of such an exemplary cooperation agreement. So a new cooperation model is being born in the Asia. In strengthening this joint vision, the interaction between two societies have an important role. Contacts are increasing at civil society, academy, media, and private sector level. So this is not a matter of relations between two governments. This expands to a solidarity network across nations. This mutual understanding and trust is an important foundation for the steps to come. Turkey and Indonesia are rising middle powers, which means that we will both play a more effective role in the diplomatic architecture of Asia. This is important for our countries and for the region. The coordination across multiple platforms, including G20 and MICTA, bring a new dynamism in global governance mechanisms. Turkey and Indonesia have similar and even overlapping approaches in regional issues. This encourages us. This is also a transformative potential for us. This manner of common thought introduces a new access in the Asian and Islamic world based on empathy, justice, and pragmatism. We are celebrating the 75th anniversary of Turkey-Indonesia relations. And this is not only limited to diplomatic context. From education to industry, from renewables to digital transformation, from cultural interaction to academic cooperation. This is a broad range of cooperation that we are talking about. Think tanks, universities, and private sector have also this interaction, which deepens our strategic partnership. We are going through an uncertain era all around the world, but Turkey and Indonesia pursue principle-based diplomacy and common values. These fluctuations thus may be turned into opportunities with dialogue, mutual respect, leading to regional stability and welfare. Coming together today means celebrating the past and imagining a new future for Asia. In concluding, thank you very much. I hope we are going to have efficient discussions today. I thank our friends from Indonesia, the members of the missions, and you, dear participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nebi, Memiş. And in the last part of our opening speakers, General Counsel of the Istanbul, Indonesia Consulate, Mr. Dariano is invited to give his speech. Sayın
Foreign Policy Strategy Agency, Honorable Professor Dr. Nebi from SETA Foundation, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, allow me to convey a message from His Excellency Mr. Ahmad Rizal Purnama, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Republic of Turkey. At this moment, the ambassador is in Jakarta for an official working visit. However, due to the importance of today's policy planning dialogue, His Excellency wishes to ensure that his thoughts and perspectives are still shared with all of you. It is therefore my honor as the Consul General of the Republic of Indonesia in Istanbul to deliver the ambassador's remarks on his behalf. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning, merhaba. This year marks 75th years of Indonesia-Turkey relations, friendship to strategic partnership. Our ties has grown deeper, anchored in trust, guided by shared values. Our partnership has reached new heights through the high-level Strategic Cooperation Council under the leadership of our two presidents. As we celebrate the milestone, we must look ahead and shape the next 25 years toward our centenary in 2050. I'm grateful to have so many brilliant minds here to help chart that course: academicians, thinkers, industries, all in one room, all in one goal. Allow me to share a few thoughts to help frame our discussion today. Colleagues, Our bilateral relations do not exist in a vacuum. They are influenced by the wider regional and global order. But our partnership also has the power to shape that order. The world around us is shifting in ways we cannot always control, and not every change is in our favor. We see the decline of multilateralism, the return of great power rivalry, the rise of protectionism. The global system, once built on cooperation, is slowly giving way to competition. National interests dominate, common interests fade. If these trends continue, by 2050, the world could be more divided, more unequal, and more unstable. Imagine a world where trade blocks replace open markets, where the climate change redraws coastlines, and digital divide becomes the new inequality. That is the reality we must prepare for. And that is the world where Indonesia and Turkey must find their place. The question is not only how we adapt, but how we lead and project our ideals to the global society. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, by 2050, Indonesia will be the fourth largest economy in the world, Turkey in the 10th or 11th. Imagine a world no longer centered on the North Atlantic, but balanced between the West and the rest. A multipolar world whose stability will depend on how the emerging powers lead. Both Indonesia and Turkey will be shapers of the systems. With our voice, capacity, and credibility, we can help to steer global discourse, from trade to technology, from peace to sustainability. As leaders of the Global South, we carry a shared responsibility to make a more just, inclusive, and representative global governance. The call for UN reform and the fairer international financial systems is a moral imperative. As President Erdogan said, the world is bigger than five, and Indonesia fully agrees. To shape the future, we must put our best efforts for today's challenges, but also prepare for tomorrow's. What will define the global agenda in 2050? Let us imagine a world driven by green transition, where clean energy powers cities. A world powered by digital transformation, where AI, data, automation redefine how we work and live. World guided by ethical governance, where power is balanced by responsibility and progress by sustainability. This is not a fantasy. It is a future within reach if we work together. To stay relevant in that world, our cooperation must be transformative. With that in mind, allow me to share my thoughts on Indonesia-Turkey's partnership in 2050. First, our partnership should be grounded in collaboration. Shared progress must guide us forward. National interest and global interest are not in conflict. No country thrives alone in a turbulent world. Second, we must build a win-win economic partnership. Trust is the foundation. When the trust grows, prosperity follows. Indonesia resource downstreaming policy and Turkey's technology-driven industrialization fit naturally together. Together, we can build a powerful value chain from Indonesian raw materials to Turkish innovation, creating global products that benefits for both nations. But our vision should reach further toward a fairer global economy, rooted in a shared development for all, not just a few. Third, we must set a clear strategic priorities for the next 25 years. Defense cooperation will remain a cornerstone of our partnership. We must expand joint production, joint ventures, and technology transfer. To strengthen our capabilities and ensure strategic autonomy, we must also deepen cooperation in a green development. Climate change is not longer a distant threat. It is a present reality. Let us work together on a new and renewable energy, sustainable and industry, and circular economy that turn challenges into opportunities. This is how we prove that growth and sustainability can go hand in hand. Lastly, we must accelerate digital transformation. The next frontier of prosperity will be digital, and our nation should be among its leading pioneers. Let us work together on digitalization, cybersecurity, and smart industries. Let our universities and startups collaborate to develop a new ecosystems of innovation. And we can connect to our peoples through a digital bridge, linking ideas, talent, and opportunities across our region. Distinguished guests, these are our priorities, the building blocks of a shared future. If we stay the course, our partnership in 2050 will be stronger and transformative. A model of cooperation between the two rising powers, grounded in mutual respect and shared vision. Our task is clear: to be part of the solution, to advance peace, justice, and equitable growth. Let this dialogue lead to action. Let it mark the beginning of a new chapter. Let us celebrate our past, deliver in the present, and shape the future together. Indonesia, Türkiye, Partnership for the People, for the New World. Thank you. Teşekkür ederim. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Kıymetli konuşmalarından ötürü Sayın Başkonsolos'a şükranlarımızı sunuyoruz. Kıymetli misafirler, şimdi küresel ve bölgesel gelişmeler başlıklı ilk panel oturumumuza geçiyoruz. Panelin moderatörlüğünü yapmak üzere SETA Vakfı araştırmacısı Doçent Doktor Sayın Hüseyin Mercan'ı, panelistlerimizden Ankara Sosyal Bilimler Üniversitesi öğretim üyesi Profesör Doktor Sayın Gürol Baba'yı, yine Ankara Sosyal Bilimler Üniversitesi'nden Doktor Sayın Tufan Kutay Boran'ı, Endonezya Dış Politika Strateji Ajansı Başkanı Sayın Muhammed Takdir'i, Orta Güçler Çalışma Ağı Endonezya Dış Politika Topluluğundan Sayın Jenny Sari Vinata'yı sahneye davet ediyor ve sözü moderatörümüze bırakıyorum.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our panel. Actually, today we have gathered for a very strategic occasion to discuss about bilateral relations between Indonesia and Turkey. As you observe, in recent years, there has been an upward momentum in Turkish-Indonesian relations in many fields, in economic fields, political, military, and etc. And by the way, let me tell you that Indonesian and Turkish peoples are very close to each other as well. When you visit any small village in Turkey, in Anatolian part of the country, eastern or anywhere in the country, you can easily say Turkish people love Indonesian people, especially the one who went to Mecca or Medina, or the one who has experience about pilgrimage. So you can see that they have many lovely stories about Indonesian people. And also, when I visited Indonesia, I personally observed that Indonesian people also love Turkish people. And also, it's very clear indicator that we don't have only political or diplomatic relations, and even cultural and humanitarian relations. We have very close relations, and we love each other. And that's why on the occasion of 75th anniversary of Turkish-Indonesian relations, this panel, this event will be very strategic, and also it will be very important contribution to our partnership for the future projection. In this panel, we have 4 esteemed speakers, and 2 from Turkey and 2 from Indonesia. Professor Gürol Baba and His Excellency Muhammed Takdir, and Dr. Tufan Kutay Boran, and Mr. Jenny Winata. Welcome to our panel. And our first speaker, Professor Gürol Baba, and you have 15 minutes, Professor. The floor is yours, please.
Hüseyin Hocam, thank you very much. I've actually came from that part of the world like a couple of days ago. I was in China, Shanghai, for almost like 2 months as a professor. And I managed to catch up with some Indonesian colleagues also in Shanghai to talk about their outlook towards the region. So when I was talking through the Indonesian foreign policy towards the region, I was also thinking about what type of a talk that I should deliver here. And I figured out 2, I would say, official initiatives, and even like high-profile initiatives, and whether there could be some sort of an overlap in those 2 initiatives. One of them is, as you may already know, that's the 2019 Asia and EU initiative, and the other one is ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific initiative. Obviously, I won't be able to get into the details of like 2 initiatives, yet I figured out that there are 3 important commonalities between those 2 high-level initiatives, which are openness, inclusivity, and practical cooperation. And both of those initiatives, to some extent, fall into a very well-known international relations concept called hedging. In other words, both countries today, very important regional, also important middle powers, very proactive middle powers in their regions. Naturally, they don't want to be very fully and deeply aligned of any of the great powers. So in that case, I figured out that overlap of these 2 official initiatives could be a good startup. My talk is going to have a theoretical foundation, but it also planning to give a practically oriented type of a tendency. So I'm not going to talk about the theory, but I'm trying to apply that theory to the Indonesian and Turkish foreign policy behavioral patterns. Since both of those 2 countries could be labeled as middle powers, I can put forward 3 very well-known and very well-referred foreign policy behavioral patterns of middle powers. The first one is a like-mindedness. The second one is international institutions, and the third one is international law. After I figure out these, very significant commonalities of the middle powers, I try to search for what type of similarities Turkey and Indonesia has been following within the lines of these three very well-known foreign policy patterns. Like-mindedness underlines middle powers' actions of building coalitions without camps. Middle powers are successful actors in global politics in developing issue-based coalitions by overlapping their preferences rather than very strict, powerful, rigid formal alliances. And it is easier for middle powers, especially of the middle powers of Asia, to collaborate with the other like-minded middle powers. And I will come to that. For Turkey and Indonesia, regarding their like-mindedness, they have a very significant potential of identifying narrow and normatively defensive agendas. Three empirical elements that I can underline here. For example, risk reduction at sea. I'm going to underscore and overscore this C element in my presentation. Second one, humanitarian protection. And the third one, predictable economic rules. The second element is international institutions. They are quite an important tools for middle powers to amplify their voice. Not because middle powers single-handedly are not important actors of international politics. Obviously they are, especially for if you are talking about Indonesia and Turkey in their own realms. But international institutions, what they do, they provide procedures, and if you may, a microphone to amplify their voice. Their tool-oriented perspective for middle powers is actually purposive, in the sense that they are not ceremonial. Through the international institutions, middle powers turn their national interests or overlapping preferences into actual rules and ratified rules. This actually brings us to international law, which is also a very significant tool of middle powers that they can use like legitimacy as statecraft. International law is a power multiplier for middle powers. They are, as long as international law is used as a floor for behavior and a ceiling for escalation. For middle powers, especially for Turkey and Indonesia, for both countries, international law provides like law-anchored signaling, which will lower the miscalculation of the risks at sea. Once again, I'm underscoring the importance of sea, protect civilians in conflict, and predictability for commerce. Well, after this theoretical background, I think I need to underline a couple of things about the world that we are living in today. I think none of us in this room would argue that there is an increasing great power competition all around the world, and particularly at sea. Two important sea platforms, if I may, is the Black Sea for Turkey and obviously the South China Sea for Indonesia. In my research, underlined a very significant commonality of two countries without any previous arrangement, without any previous organization, without any previous agreement. Both countries, in their own sea platforms, they followed initiatives focusing on sovereignty first and the importance of international law. That is, for Indonesia, it's being a firm and ardent follower of its maritime rights in Natuna Islands, and also looking in a maritime boundary with Vietnam. For Turkey, that's the Black Sea Grain Initiative during the Ukraine war. Both countries, without any previous organization, without any previous assignment, they followed very similar policies. So that actually underlines a very significant potential for both countries. Even without any type of arrangement, they are following similar straight lines of foreign policy behavior. Well, more practically speaking, both countries, they meet in ASEAN and also Indian Ocean Rim Association. Both countries, obviously, Turkey is not a member of these two, but partners in both of these. And that brings two countries on both land and sea elements of international politics together. If we go deeper, in February and April, both countries' presidents met in Bogor and Ankara, and they underlined very similar elements of objectives. For example, cooperation and regional stability and humanitarian concerns in rebuilding of Gaza. So what I can bring up by talking about these very political realities and the theoretical underlining patterns, I can put forward maybe 5 political strategic opportunities in the short term for both countries. One of them, once again, is maritime risk management. The maritime risk management is about diffusing, not inflaming, the great power rivalry at sea. As I said, that's a Natun area for Indonesia, and for Turkey, that was the Black Sea grain corridor. What they can do, and from my research, could be a joint paper maybe in IORA or also in ASEAN, which focuses on 2 things: a standard reporting of non-military maritime coercion and practical uses of United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea. The politics logic is very simple. Reduce the risk, keep trade moving, and keep everyone out of a camp logic. I don't agree with the renewal of the Cold War in international politics. We don't live in a renewed or the Cold War 2.0 today. We are in a different world, which gives a lot of cracks to the middle powers which would like to bring their objectives together. The second one could be a common humanitarian diplomacy, and Palestine could be a very good platform for that. And the joint language of 2 countries' presidents was very visible in 2025 April statements. What they can do, maybe a Gaza reconstruction accountability contact group with the like-minded states, both from Southeast Asia and also from the Middle East, to fund, to project aid corridors and adherence to international humanitarian law. The third one could be something already happening, which is defense industrial statecraft. The previous officials already talked about the Ankara unmanned aircrafts, and also the technology transfers between the 2 countries that they talked about. The point that 2 countries can follow within this defense industrial statecraft could be like a fix-up, a habit of cooperation, multi-year budgets, and a constituency stability to keep it going. Fourth one, already spelled out. I did some research and I published on this, which is MICTA, which brings 2 countries alongside with other like-minded partners. And MICTA's importance for the middle powers is that it was not created or run or maintained or managed by great powers. It was a fully middle power initiative. And there is a very significant example of that middle power initiative, and it could be a delivery device for middle power positions in United Nations. Once again, about the UN reform, food security corridors, maritime safety norms. Short, specific communiques tied to actions. Last one is Black Sea to Malacca, a shared narrative about free and lawful seas. This is once again related to Turkey's enforcement of Montreal Convention, mediation on Black Sea shipping, and Indonesia's defense of its right at the Natun era. In other words, both countries share a common diplomatic story that great power navies are not the only actors that keep sea lines open. Middle powers, through law, through coordination, through predictable behavior, they can create a narrative which is explicit in capitals, speeches each year. I would like to wrap up by bringing these theoretical and the empirical parts together. Like-mindedness supplies political weight. Institutions turn this weight into procedures, and international law provides legitimacy and restraint. Applied together, Turkey and Indonesia can expand their strategic autonomy, manage great power risks, and shape practice others can adopt. In other words, create a magnetism for the other middle powers to subscribe, to work together, without joining any of the great power conflicting camps. Thank you.
Hocam. Thank you for your inspiring speech. Indeed, the 5 points which you pointed out in a transforming world actually is so crucial to analyze newly emerging Turkish-Indonesian relations for the future projection. And I hope these points will make a contribution to the new characteristics of bilateral relations. And of course, the officials will consider and will evaluate what you pointed out. Thank you again. And now the turn is the Ambassador, Mohammed Takdir. And Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein, for this opportunity. Before presenting my views or share my views on this, I'd like to make a disclaimer. My agency is actually to provide policy recommendation strategy, both for the minister and for the president. So as we work at this agency, most of the work must be based on data. So please bear with me because some of the graphic and curve will show you maybe it's quite difficult to understand, but I think it's also a chance for me to be invited for the second time next future. I would like to start with this brief article written by Simon Cooper. He cynically writes about how the U.S. administration struggled with the general election in 2020, I think. And because of the struggling of voter separation and false identification of voters, like in North Carolina and some in Pennsylvania and Georgia, many observers try to describe that the United States need help. So somebody stitched the broken United States. It's democracy, the old democracy. And now that the U.S. always try to pretend and apply what they consider right for themselves and try to bring their own democracy to other nations. So this is kind of, ironic for all of us. So this is somebody that stitched the broken U.S. just like what they pretend to do with the other countries throughout history, such as the ideas of Arab Spring, transition, democracy, and etc. in many parts of the world. Right. This index actually, I think, shows us that the idea of implementing democracy by using the criteria of, the Western's values has to be digested well, because when we understand very in the simple term, when you are in full democratic countries, meaning your domestic electoral process is very good, but then we see that your foreign policy attitude is not really reflecting the domestic good electoral process. So this is the index applied by Economic Intelligence Unit, but I seemingly sense that sometimes the thesis is just we don't understand until we find out that this is not really right, because those full democracy as I said, in their global attitude, not really democratic. You can find out the certain country, for example, when they meet in the international relations, and I put it in the simple illustration using this U-shaped clash between the full democracy and authoritarian. Most of the full democracy, as you see here, are the Western nations. And most of the flow democracy probably include Indonesia as or the developing nation. But when they have wars or conflict between the full democracy and authoritarian, then the victim might be all those coming from flow democracy, either become a proxy or becoming vulnerable to their interests. If this happen, then they would be backsliding. We saw that in Ukraine. Ukraine has a general election in 2014, 2010, but things happened in 2014, and then this country is backsliding. Myanmar, the same too. It has a general election in 2015 and 2020, then things happen. Now we have seen Myanmar in the very difficult situation at this time. And because of that kind of relationship, then this data shows that a tendency of intrastate really going up. But what's surprising us, the international intrastate also going up. These are the domestic vulnerability enjoyed by anybody that put those countries on their proxy. So when you see this data, intrastate is increasing, by the same time, internationalized intrastate also increasing, meaning the increasing proxy wars at the bottom of the U-shape, the flow democracy. That's really frightening for us, especially those who studied international relations. And when you see ASEAN, this curve actually shows us there are 4 elements or indicators: factionalized elite, economic decline, and state legitimation and external intervention. The way we read this curve is, if it is going up, it's worsening. If it is going down, it's improving. Most of the curve for the ASEAN members, 10 ASEAN members on factionalized elites is constant, but above the modest line, 3. So you see like Thailand almost 10, Indonesia 7.1, and the economic decline, despite some of them also improving, but a few of them also increasing. State legitimacy. State legitimacy is the way the factional elite, they have problem with their own group. They are easily vulnerable for external intervention. And you see the number, Myanmar is 9.5. Myanmar on external intervention 7. Those countries in ASEAN, I can conclude that they are very much vulnerable to any proxy that happen. That's why ASEAN developed non-choice policy. They don't want to be sidelined with any great power, either with China, either with US. They have their own resilience effort to not to choose, but to develop their own source of power. Then when we see the index democracy that I just show you, this is demonstrate the group between those in the authoritarian and those in the full democratic countries. They have their own proxy. China and Russia, I think, they have their own same proxy vis-a-vis the United States. And most of the security arrangement developed by the United States, for example, they did it in unilateral way with Quad, consists of India, Japan, Australia, and AUKUS. AUKUS with the United Kingdom and Australia, but also bilaterally, like for example, enhanced air cooperation with Australia or bilateral defense guidelines with Philippines. So this shows us again, if ASEAN are not careful with this kind of, configurations, then I think it's an open vulnerability for outside power to influence or penetrate their strategic interest in ASEAN. This is just to show you how the breakdown of Quad between US, UK, India, and Australia, they are all full democracy. And while Russia and PRC are authoritarian. Now, the things that I'm talking earlier about a fragmented world is derived on, we see the good democratic electoral process domestically in certain countries, but and then it in contrary with the foreign policy attitude globally. As a result of that, they tend to continue provocative and protectionism against those other countries outside their perimeters. It is why the reality check right now is the increasing rivalry, trust deficit, MoFA's policy, not global governance. Even like the European Union, for example, they have their own MoFA's policy. They develop stringent regulation against Indonesia. I think the United States also with the tariff, it's I think much for MoFA's policy. So kind of everybody try to protect their own interests, and it is hurting the multilateralism. Indonesia itself is actually would like to have more collaborations, international cooperation, and mutual respect and peace priority. So this is the reality check that we are now see in our world. The tendency of geopolitics now, I think, might be around three kind of problem: the war, conflict, and pandemic. So if you see, especially the pandemic, we make a study on this in 2020. Usually the pandemic happens in the cycles of the pandemic happens in every 100 years. You see the pandemic from 16 to 1699, three pandemic and etc. But since 2000 to 2021, 5 pandemic: swine flu, SARS, Ebola, MERS, COVID-19. What is the implications? Lockdown. We need corridor, travel corridor. But not every country are on board on this, especially on lockdown, because lockdown has an issue of domestic political issue. Most of the people in many parts of the world don't like lockdown because it hurt the economy. So this is the kind of the problem that we have. Indonesia itself, actually, when you study the Prabowo administration recently in 1 year of his administration, we actually rather to put forward peace and stability by prosperity rather than peace and stability by security. The school taught the whole mostly by Quad, AUKUS, and etc. They tend to choose peace and stability by security. Indonesia is peace, stability by prosperity. There is any decision President Prabowo took, it must be based upon the prosperity reasons. We develop our relation with Turkey, we develop our relation with China, with Russia at the same time. But in Europe, in the Western hemisphere, sometimes they are saying why you are so leaning with China. And we said that, or why you are members of BRICS. But we said, you never asked about why we are try to apply for the OECD. So in simple illustration, I said, if somebody want to give you like $100 million and the other will give you like $50 million, everybody will say, I will take $100 million. No, I want $150 million. So the kind of simple illustration why the strategic preference of Indonesia always based on the prosperity. And it is very much determined by our foreign policy doctrine, acts independently and actively engage. Meaning, act independently without any hesitations. If it is regard with regard to our national strategic interest, then we will be there, even we are dealing with the devil. So this is show us the principle of the doctrine, and the doctrine itself has two things: the moral base and intellectual underpinning. The moral base, if you see the national emblem of Indonesia, it contains a symbol of paddy and cotton. That's prosperity. There's a kind of, because paddy and cotton is usually symbolize the prosperity, and the harmony is the national belief, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity, or pluribus unum, just like the United States. And the interesting part also is, and this is never be understood mostly by even Indonesia itself. Sometimes we only presume that Indonesia and the intellectual underpinning of the foreign policy only related to the principle mendayung di antara karang, or rowing between the two reefs. This is the author of the Indonesian foreign policy, the first vice president. So he wrote actually 3 books: the foreign policy, mendayung di antara, or in English, rowing between the two reefs. The other book is democracy, and another book is economy. Democracy we are talking right now is good governance. The economy of a small, medium, and micro enterprise that he wrote like couple decades ago is about SMEs, the economy, the cooperative. So those 3 issues feeding our debate, our intellectual debate at this moment, both nationally and internationally. So again, we only focus on the foreign policy, but actually the author itself write like 3 books, and this is the 3 inspiration that inherited our foreign policy, by our foreign policy. With regard to Turkey, I think the previous speaker already said that we have the same credential. Turkey is a middle power, Indonesia is a middle power. We are in the OIC, we are members of MICTA, we are member of G20. And if you sense the characteristic of the current policy brought by those 2 countries, I think it's kind of similar. The 20th century power, fully sovereign, global influential. The same with the ideas, the idea of 2045 golden Indonesia. Also the bridge builders, the global South proponent, free trade activists. So with these 2 characteristics, I think Turkey and Indonesia would be a very important alliance, if you want to call it alliances, in dealing with the other players or global players in international relations. And I really believe through this platform, either with BRICS, OIC, or UN and MICTA, our shared global responsibility can be undertaken towards 1 or 3 or 4 agenda, like operationalizing equitableness, promoting interoperability. Like, for example, I was posted in Europe, most of my career in Europe, with the stringent regulation, either with CBAM or UDR, it's really hurt the producing countries in the South. But in one side, I do understand their policy actually is good because they develop standardizations. And standardization is important for developing nations if they want to compete. So the developing nations should understand, and Indonesia understand well about this too. If you want to compete with the modern market, with the advanced market, then you need to adjust any policy regarding the trade, product, and services need to be standardized. But what I lack of understanding on this is they don't give us enough space to be adjusted with the standard. They just decide the decisions. This regulation will apply in 2020 something, then there is no transition. But because of our continuing advocacy on this, some of the relegation is postponed. I mean, that's the way the diplomats do. The diplomats do talking, and they talking to many things, maybe sometimes nothing, but at least it affecting our discussion on the on the strategic issue. Defending rule-based dispute mechanism. This is also important because many investment cases that be brought to arbitrations really based on the unfair dispute mechanism like ISDS. So many elements in the ISDS called actually as a toxic. Like if we consider you, I'm an investor in Turkey. If I consider Turkey not supporting my business practice in Turkey, then I will easily bring to arbitrations and put the punitive litigations in amount that bigger than my investment. Sometimes the amount is bigger than their investment. That's not really right. I think that's why many developing nations try to voice their objections on those existing dispute mechanism. With ASEAN, I think the entry point for Turkey and Indonesia or ASEAN is, since Turkey already acceded to the ASEAN TAC in 2010, then it is a starting point, good starting point to consider Indonesia as a hub to ASEAN. And if you see here the report, the Asia's survey report 2025, they make a research on the preference of ASEAN travelers to choose which country they prefer for the tourist destinations, and most of them actually choose like Japan, EU, or is Australia, and the United States. I told my colleague from Turkey yesterday, we need to put kebab on the map. At least appears on the survey in 2027, because if we're expanding the flight from Ankara or Istanbul to Jakarta to Bali and even to the eastern part of Indonesia, then we will see either if they do the survey again in 2027, kebab will appear on the map. So this is a kind of a simple illustration how to maximize or utilize the entry point that importance to the both countries. The regional initiative also resonate with our regional initiative, ASEAN and New Policy by Turkey, or with AIP of ASEAN, and a strategic interest, and it mentioned by the Deputy Minister this morning about maritime connectivity. So this is with ASEAN, but imply actually if you hold Indonesia in ASEAN and you put Indonesia as your strategic hub in ASEAN, and then I think you will benefit from that. The last point I'd like to make is this one, the middle ground. Actually, I just my term on, I just put my term, but I don't know whether this is right, and I put it as a provoking thought for the audience. Right now, if you see the slide, this is the survey coming from 2024 and 2025. But those findings in last year and this year, most of the findings connected to kinetic diplomacy, where diplomacy actually push more initiative of military engagement rather than diplomatic engagement. And I think Indonesia and Turkey should consider diplomatic channel first rather than others, because on aggressive behavior in South China Sea, it's also about solidify armed forces. New U.S. leadership also the same things. They make, you know, military operation in Venezuela. They always did that in the past in Syria, in Libya, and etc. Israel-Hamas conflict is also about kinetic diplomacy. Absolutely. Russian-Ukraine war also. So this is a kind of a test for our middle ground for the, I think Ms. Jenny will talk about middle power, but this is a middle ground to test whether our middle power actually effective in dealing with this, because Turkey and Indonesia don't have the diplomatic power, but we do have diplomatic prowess. Diplomatic prowess is a kind of agility to bring the idea of change, the idea of peace, and etc. We don't have a big embassy in many parts of the world, not just like United States or Russia, but we have the diplomatic prowess. And I think that will end my presentation. I'm looking forward to any discussion further. Back to you, Dr. Jose.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for the presentation. What you discussed actually so critical, and also there are many points to discuss about them. By the way, I look at the map about democracy index, and actually in the post-Ukrainian and Russian war process, and especially in the post-Gaza genocide process, indexes lost their meanings in our transforming world, and we will see a new reality in the upcoming years. Thank you again. And now the floor goes to Dr. Tufan Kutay-Boran from Social Sciences University of Ankara. Hocam, please.
Distinguished guests, welcome. It's really nice to be here today. I'm Kutay. I completed my doctoral degree in Indonesia, actually, as a little information. And after that, I came back, and currently I'm a lecturer in Social Sciences University of Ankara in the Department of Area Studies. Actually, I listened all of the speakers before me, and I'm really happy that all of those speakers touched a bit about my speech as well. So, but maybe we can elaborate more. We can elaborate more about those topics. So we will talk about Indonesia-Turkey's relations, but I will maybe answering some question, but I will also arise some questions as well today. First of all, is that a coincidence? This will be one of the questions. But before that, probably we should understand the main dynamics of Indonesian foreign policy, since we are talking about Indonesia and Turkey today. So, as a person who completed his PhD on Indonesian foreign policy, and also Mr. Mohammed already explained, Indonesian foreign policy, yes, basically based on foreign policy doctrine of bebas aktif. For those who does not know the meaning, bebas means free, active means active, and it's actually representing this non-belligerent stance in the Cold War period, as well as and also being active while protecting this non-belligerent stance. It was created in terms of Cold War period circumstances. However, until now, each president still emphasizing, and Indonesian foreign policy still protecting this bebas active stance. However, there is another influential factor in Indonesian foreign policy, which leaders matters. Leaders' opinions are matters. That's why, especially, we may track this as well after the 2004, which we can call democratic consolidation of Indonesian politics. Indonesian foreign policy went through some change and continuity periods. It's highly famous, especially in the literatures as well, and mostly we may see some multilateralism and some presidents periods, such as, for instance, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, and mostly keen on the bilateralism under some presidents such as Joko Widodo. This is where, you know, the leaders influence the foreign policy making. Well, currently, Indonesia-Turkey relations, of course, under the President Prabowo Subianto. So it also brings us who is actually President Prabowo. Well, as a little information, as a brief information. First of all, he's an ex-military man under the New Order period. He was he served as the head of KOSTRA, Indonesian Special Forces, and in his civilian life, he served as Minister of Defense under the Jokowi government, and currently, since end of the 2024, he is the president of Indonesia. So this is probably kind of important, since how Prabowo Subianto see or interpret the global politics as well, and how Indonesian foreign policy structuralize Turkey as a regional middle power. First of all, I can say that both countries have similarities, like previous speakers also said. We share common similarities. Both are regional middle power. Both countries do not want to stuck in the status quo. Both countries all wants to escape the status quo. And Turkey, and I think it's mainly thanks to advancement and the recent advancement, its military technology, had relatively succeed to escape from this status quo, especially in the region. And this can be seen by other regional middle powers, all who wants to aim to reach this status in their region. And it's probably nothing normal than see Turkey as a country who is influential in the region and read Turkey from this neo-realist point of view, where material capabilities is important to have this strategic autonomy in the region. So probably as a military statesman, Prabowo Subianto administration or Indonesian foreign policy under Prabowo Subianto may read Turkey from this kind of perspective, and it's according to me, it's highly normal. And since from his defense ministry, if we see, and also the other speakers talk, when we're thinking about Indonesia-Turkey relations, we mostly talking about defense industry. Of course, there are some advancements as well in the other sectors as well. But when we talk about Indonesian-Turkish relations, yes, we talk about defense diplomacy. When we see the media, we mostly see about the convergence in defense sector. So that's the side of, let's stop here and let's think about the Turkey as well. This is the side of Indonesia. But what about Turkey? What is the Turkey's approach towards Asia? First of all, most of you know, we have this Asia initiative, which was launched by Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2019. Briefly, it's aimed to enhance the relations with the Asian countries in different sectors, diplomatically, economically, culturally, and etc. Okay, we have this. However, while looking at this definition, the Asia initiative, it seems like kind of holistic. It's covering the region, but it's a holistic region. I mean, when we talk about Asia, which part of Asia? Which Asia? What regions? I mean, it comes to me a kind of holistic approach. So in this term, what also important is how Asian countries consider Asian initiative. What Asia initiative means for Asian countries as well. I think this also matters. You can have a doctrine such as, for instance, Indonesia have this Bebas Aktif, but how the other actors considers Bebas Aktif. This is also important. Same for the Turkey. How Asian countries considers Asia initiative. This is, I think, kind of idea of constructing each other. You may have a doctrine, foreign policy doctrine, or you may initiate a doctrine, but how another actors or what another actors understand from that doctrine as well is also important. So I think for me, Turkey is kind of a country who succeed with its strategic autonomy in its region and thanks to its material capabilities. So this brings us to another question. If Turkey have not succeeded in its military technology, would Asia initiative could be successful as well or not? Or how the other Asian countries define Turkey in its region? This is also a question that probably we may ask. However, the middle power cooperation, countries such as Turkey and Indonesia, also bring many benefits. First of all, the trap that I just mentioned, that being stuck between this great power rivalry. First of all, this is an advantage for both sides, that you do not have to under the direction of, you do not have to being under the direction of this great power and middle power what is that called, relation, which give both sides a flexibility. This is first thing first. And Indonesia's partnership with Turkey, which is a relatively non-black as well in its region, also gives a flexibility. By the way, I'm saying this, I'm mostly emphasizing about Indonesia and Turkey, but please conceptualize it to the whole middle power cooperation. So first of all, this is about the flexibility that gives benefits from the both sides. And the second is, yes, Turkey recent years, maybe the right word could be struggle to obtain its strategic autonomy by working on its defense industry. However, for other middle powers who would like to cooperate with Turkey, is directly obtain that strategic autonomy by transferring it or by working with Turkey. So it also, so I'm also coming with an idea that strategic autonomy can be transferable rather than struggling by yourself as well. So this is also important, and I would like to probably finish this speech with a Javanese proverb. Since I studied in Java, there's a proverb that I like. Nguruk tanpa bolo, menang tanpa ngasorake. Win, but without offending, which means you may have both beneficial concepts. You may cooperate with the similar size power by not offending the greater power than you. So this is what I'm talking about, the flexibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tufan Hocam. You may elaborate flexibility and transfer of strategic autonomy in QA sessions. Maybe it would be a good point to analyze bilateral relations between two countries. Thank you again. Now our fourth and last speaker, Ms. Jenistari Vinata from Indonesia. Ms. Vinata, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. I have to extend my appreciation to Pak Kutai. I call you Pak because you're more Javanese than I am. I didn't even know the meaning of the sentence earlier. Okay, so the PPT is shown, yeah. And this PPT is very simplistic, so I felt pressured after seeing the PPT by Pak Takdir, that is very beautiful. First of all, some of you might not know yet about Middle Power Studies Network. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, let me just explain briefly what is this Middle Power Studies Network, the written affiliation from my slide. It is basically under Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, a think tank organization, non-partisan and independent in Jakarta. We have been there since 2014, and the difference that we have with think tanks is that we engage the broader public and civil society, the younger generations. So if you come to Jakarta and you see the largest conference speaking about global issues and so on, about 10,000 people registered and about 8,000 showed up morning to afternoon. That's FPSA, and that's the vibrant community that we're trying to maintain in the foreign policy discourse. But aside from Middle Power Studies Network, I can proudly say as well, looking at the composition of the panel, I am also probably speaking from the voice of the next gen foreign policy thinkers. I will still be here probably 80 years later, hopefully, or 60 years later. So the question that I would always ask for myself and for my community filled with next gen foreign policy thinkers or practitioners is, what is the strategic choice that our country needs to make and can make in the current state of the world, which consequence will be in our lives for 50 years ahead, right? And so to answer that, we need to understand the current state of the world. And what I'll be elaborating here is basically the strategic trends of the current middle powers dynamic that we have captured for over the past 2 years of Middle Power Studies Network, where we convene the previous gen foreign policy leaders and thinkers in the dialogues and conversations. Just last 2 months ago, we held the Middle Powers of the South roundtable, and that's where Turkey was there. Professor Mithat from Kadir Has University participated, former Foreign Minister of Egypt, Nabil Fahmy, and someone from Brazil, also South Africa, Nigeria, former minister as well. And there are strategic trends that we captured there. And here I tried to summarize very briefly, hopefully, so we can leave room for interactive discussion. Next. Oh, sorry, I held the clicker. I think it's pretty much a little bit indicated previously by some speeches, but how we describe it is not to endorse, but what we're seeing today is power-based order more than rules-based order. Of course, when we went to London conference held by Chatham House in the UK, we were surprised to see that the topic, the theme, was rewriting the rules. And we were wondering, it is coming from the UK, and we were wondering, is it the rules that we need to rewrite, or is it the abuse of the rules and the system that we're seeing? And at the moment, the right question probably to ask is what needs to remain and what needs to be changed from the system and from the rules, and to be really exact in pointing that out. And of course, credibility of rules-based order is eroding, and we see unilateralism, as mentioned, protectionism, me first sort of policy coming, but it's always the discourse between US decline and China rise and so on, and that's why we sort of want to lift up the narrative of this is the middle power moment, which I will explain a little bit in the current state of the world. And previously as well, we have had a long chat with some foreign policy thinkers that have been there since the post-Cold War era and really have observed the world then and now. And all of them, many of them would say that what they're seeing today is a permanent change instead of temporary change. And I wouldn't be credible to say so because I live in the current era. But them, they said that they would know if it's a temporary change or permanent change, and probably many would agree that it's a permanent change. And that's why I will just skip some first. That's why there's this famous quote suddenly being popularized again from Antonio Gramsci, saying that the old is dying, but the new one struggles to be born, and we're seeing the symptoms of it. And so the question is, what kind of emerging new world order will we see, and where is middle powers' roles in it, like Turkey and Indonesia? Back again to the other point of the state of the world we're seeing is multilateral agendas, of course, are at risk of failures. Many from my generation, of course, they would care about climate change, they would care about green transition, they would care about how technology can be solutions in all of this multilateral agenda. At the same time, inadequate financing is there, critically underfunded. And I actually did see that UN made an analogy to help us set the context, a very nice one, when they said that, to put in context, let's say about 10% of global military spending could actually fully vaccinate every child in low and lower middle income countries. Less than 4% of global military spending would be enough annually to end hunger by 2030. So that's just to put the context. But it's not with the intention of this this versus that, but how can we sort of synergize and really put things into effective implementation, and that's where technology will come in later. But in many cases, that's where the political domestic debate is and polarization happen. And so what we describe the current moment, which this term, the middle power moment, came out unplanned during the dialogue that we held last 2 months ago. And it was reflecting on the Asian African Conference in Bandung that time, where they said that at that time they also thought that it was a turning point. But the difference was, it was the Global South movement at that time. But today, just say that recent UNGA, we heard the dissatisfaction are not only coming from the Global South, but also countries from the Western part of the world, or you may call it Global North, depends on how you describe this dichotomy. But again, this dissatisfaction of the world order and the need for multilateral reform is now voiced by all parts of the world. Somebody told me from the Western partner was describing it as, the question is, who would be most anxious about the US unpredictability? It is not the Global South. And they would answer, maybe the Western allies? Yes and no, because the most anxious one would be the US themselves. But then the effects is the middle powers, or you would call it major powers, whatever you want to call it, but these Western powers, Australia, and also Germany, and so on, they start to voice out again on the multilateral reform and the world order that no longer works. And even some think tanks and partners across Germany have been raising the Bandung principles nowadays, and that gives a good sign, although far from being implemented. And the second point about the middle power moment is we see that the middle power's rise is so far a la carte, eclectic and sporadic. Maybe Bandung movement back then was a little bit more organized, although they don't have WhatsApp at that time or emails didn't really work. But today it is a la carte, sporadic, and we see it bilaterally. We probably see it trilaterally. We see it more flexibly and in a form of flexible coalitions. So for us to force it to be a collective movement might not be realistic at the current time, but this a la carte method is what we need to fuel in and put substance into, including Türkiye-Indonesia relations. And now to the main question that I ask, and for my generation to ask, is of course for everyone to ask, and for the region to ask as well, my region, Southeast Asia, or your region, and the world as well, and the middle powers, the strategic choices that we can make. First, of course, the pursuit of strategic autonomy is a necessity today beyond just preference or ambition. It is not an ambition only that your foreign minister did once said that Turkey aims to be the fully independent, effective, and influential actor, if I'm not mistaken, to shape international agenda as well. And Indonesia, the same country that would want our country to be so. And so being strategically autonomous and autonomy and free from pressures and can say no when needed and have rooms for maneuver is beyond just ambition. And now it's a necessity, whether you are Western country or whether you are South countries. And you would see that President Macron, when he visited our region, his speech also said something about diversification as their aim. And then you would hear it somewhere from Germany as well and many other countries. And so that has become the point of convergence among the middle powers, and the way to make it practical, of course, you would see where we find comparative advantage or where we can sort of forge together cooperation, including application of technology somewhere in the sectors. FTA, SEPA, hopefully we can manage to have soon, and investment on critical industries of the future. I've been trying to read some books about critical industries and critical minerals, although I might not enjoy it, but I know that it's the sectors that will determine and shape the strategic choice of my country and our regions, and hence probably as well to be explored between Indonesia, Turkey, and beyond. And second, wrong number over there, advancing regionalism is also how middle powers today are having their approach on. And I'm saying this because we're reflecting on Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific theater. It might not be the same in Turkey, and maybe there's limitations in this region, but if we reflect on Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific, ASEAN has actually successfully at least set the norms and the terms of how external powers can influence or do something in the region, and at least we set the terms of how they can behave in the region. And second, but when I say advancing regionalism, it also means relevance and to put substance into it, and how you can address the challenge of the current century, such as online scams is the new emerging things in our region with the existence of technology and internet. That means relevance is also one thing, to put substance into regionalism, and also trust management is also one thing. Lowy Institute just published a report where they said that when they scale the influence of external powers and also among ASEAN countries, they would rank for my country, for Thailand, for Malaysia, and so on, who would rank first in their influence scale. And turns out that ASEAN countries remain the top rank for each of the ASEAN countries. So we are collectively still most influential among each other without us really seeing it so much or saying it too much. And that's the second strategic choice that we can make. And third is collective peace efforts, like what we see with Turkey, Egypt, Qatar at the moment, and many more. Well, we see, of course, Quad is one of them, although the US was there, but it wasn't really driven by the US like we see in AUKUS probably. Quad has invested in infrastructure and vaccines, which is pretty much concrete things as well. And that might not be just the US, but we see Japan and India also rising up. And last but not least is substantive middle power to middle power partnership is what I think the main point of all of this elaboration. And I intentionally put their literacy because yesterday when we were brought by, I was brought with this delegation to talk to some think tanks, and I just realized that the literacy on Indonesia and Southeast Asia and Turkey might still not be adequate enough or there on the radar of the wider community. It might be in the leadership level, trust is built and awareness is built, but among the academic community, the younger generation, the think tanks, the private sectors, it might not be still on top of the radar despite of the booming prospects of our region. And region literacy as well. That's why not just Indonesia, because we're also the gate to Southeast Asia, and hence Indonesia and Southeast Asia. Vice versa, Indonesia needs to also increase our literacy about Turkey, and hence we can answer better what kind of things to trade, what kind of things to invest on, and so on. So that's also an important one, literacy. And I'll try to make it short. This is the last slide. The brief do and don'ts that we captured from our dialogues. We had a consensus that, of course, trust is a key currency, leaders level, but also the wider communities, private sector to private sector, and so on. When I just went back from Australia and I was researching about Indonesia, Australia, despite us being neighbors, trust was very difficult to maintain and to elevate. But with Turkey, it might be more natural than arduous. But with Australia, our neighbor, it might be more arduous than natural. So there's a leadership factor there, but our homework is how to translate it into wider community. Second, principle of equality, which we are doing pretty well. And I think earlier we also mentioned about how standard is imposed might not work anymore. We want to have cooperation based on principle of equality, and we are doing it better with middle powers most of the times. And Middle powers must avoid replicating hegemony. Of course, this works in ASEAN. We don't call ourselves hegemon. We use our culture and the way we do things, and that works well. Third, in the face of limitation, coalition gives legitimacy and leverage. Of course, when we do something alone, we can't really achieve so much, but when we do it in coalition, you can see it in coalition of the willing, probably in Western way, or in recent Gaza peace efforts and so on. Fourth, flexible format over rigid alliances. Someone also mentioned that we don't really do rigid alliances, but issue-based, over ideological based, or democracy promotion-based cooperation might work in the coming decades ahead better. So that's all from me. Looking forward for the interactive discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Winata, for the presentation. In order to use the time economically and efficiently, I will directly open the Q&A session. We have almost 20 minutes. And please ask your questions to our speakers directly and shortly, please, and introduce yourself. Professor? Yeah.
My question to Ambassador Mohammed Takdir. You talk about the moral base and global responsibility, and you know that there are some, and Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. And in Ukraine, for example, there are Crimean Tatars, ethnic groups. They are suffering under the occupation of Russia, and there are a lot of human rights abuses. And most importantly, in your region, in Asia, China, there is, Uyghur Turks. They are also suffering under the human rights abuses under the China. So my question is to you, as a largest Muslim country, I think you have done a lot of work in the Gaza genocide to stop it. But what is your position on this conflicts in terms of these Muslims and Turkish ethnic groups who are suffering under the human rights abuses? Thank you.
Respond directly. This is kind of a journalist question, so I should be very careful to craft my response to that. Basic principle from our constitutions that we will stand against any suffering or humiliations made by other nations that are unjust and unfair. But I think in the global politics, there is things that work behind the scene that sometimes we don't report to the public because, we try to work out the problem through a certain approach that maybe would be resolved in the next perhaps 5 years, 2 years. It's very much depend on the ability of our diplomatic official on the ground. So with regard to the problem, the Muslim minority, for example, or the Muslim majority that having problem with the local government, I think in every channel that we met, the concerns usually voice, but not through megaphone diplomacy. We talk sometimes with our partners that there is I think you need to pay attention on this part. It might bring difficulties in our relationship, but not all those things appear in the media. So my assurances to you is that we embrace and we adhere to our principle in the constitutions. As I said, we are not in favor with the injustice treatment to people, even with they are not our people. But to avoid any larger escalation from that, we must be very careful. And if you pay attention to my president's statement in the United Nations General Assembly last September, he said that violent cycles reproduce another violence if you do the things through violence. So diplomatic words, that's why in the last slide of my presentation, I put kinetic diplomacy, because other big power try to advance armed forces rather than diplomatic efforts. And I think Türkiye-Indonesia as a twin, not as a brother, as a twin. Even I said yesterday, we are twin. You feel sick, I feel sick. If you are thin, we feel you. Just like in the Muslim countries, and the Holy Quran said, if part of our body is hurt, then the others will be hurt. But we don't put such kind of suffering as media consumption. So as I said, we channel all those kind of communications behind closed door. We discuss with our partners, and hopefully they will do something to avoid a further escalation on that. So that's the general response to kind of questions journalists, and I think it's very difficult, especially if you are in the open, but again, I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is for Professor Guro. I learned that you also an expert on Australian foreign policy. So I just want to know your opinion about Australian foreign policy, as well as its ally toward Indonesia, and how Turkey influence these policies with benefit Indonesia-Turkey relationship in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Turkey's relations in general to the region is, although it may might sound a bit awkward to you when I spell this out, they are new. So this Asia Anew initiative is actually new. So in the sense that if we are talking about the institutions in Asia and Turkey's relations with them, it is also new. In the sense that Turkey's foreign policy towards the region works through two main strands. One is through bilaterals. The second one is through minilaterals and multilaterals. And within all these, I feel like bilaterals and minilaterals work better than with multilaterals. I would need to include ASEAN into this. We all know that Turkey, sort of, extra regional actor, it would require to be more embracing and being more embraced by the institutions in Asia in order to increase its clout. But so far, I don't think it is the case, or I don't think it has achieved that level yet. Yet, what can be done, because ASEAN's, I think, internal structure enables for extra regional actors to create, quote unquote, their own factions with the like-minded partners within the institution. That's what Turkey can do. Obviously, Turkey cannot be a full member of ASEAN. Well, basically, it's because of the foundational nature of the organization itself. Turkey is not a Southeastern Asian country. Yet, as I try to mention in my talk, and I think my colleague also reiterated that, within ASEAN, Turkey could develop its own, let me put it in this way, quote unquote, its clique within ASEAN. And I would say some of the speakers here underscored the importance of being natural. Ambassador sitting right next to me used the term twin, being twins. But in actual sense, in international relations, it has a different type of conceptualization that is called geoculture, which I have been working in the last couple of publications of mine about Turkey, Malaysia, Türkiye-Indonesia, which has a geocultural type of historical, cultural, background-oriented links that you don't need to define. They are naturally there. And in ASEAN, those type of things could enable to build up this sort of, cliques within ASEAN. For Turkey, it could be not necessarily a tactic, and I think it could turn into a strategy. And for that type of a strategy within ASEAN, Indonesia could be a great partner. And great in the sense of this geocultural background and links that we don't even need to define. They are already there. Same with, I would say, also with Malaysia. So Turkey, regarding ASEAN, it has its, natural partners already there. It doesn't need to be a full member, but it can increase its own clout through its, dynamic foreign policy, already happening, defense infrastructure, lots of commonalities to looking at the world, enabling international law in the region, which fits into the ASEAN framework already. So in that sense, rather than approaching ASEAN as a whole, I think Turkey should need to develop, let me use this term, to slice it up. Some slices in ASEAN would be more valuable, practically more valuable to Turkey than others. And one of those slices obviously include Indonesia. That's the type of, probably a short-term type of a strategy in the development or maybe sharpening of Asia-NU towards the region. We can follow it up if you want to.
Another question?
Thank you very much for all the panelists for the great presentation. So let me introduce myself. I'm Salman, master student at Ankara Social Science University. So my question is directed to Professor Gurol. So in your presentation, you mentioned that Indonesia and Turkey have similar behaviors in terms of being a middle power, especially in the sea issue. Indonesia in the South China Sea and Turkey in Black Sea region. And at the same time, you also mentioned several issues that the two countries can work together as a middle power. So my question is how being just a similar in middle power behavior could overcome the national interest that both countries have, because what I see is that Indonesia and Turkey is two countries separated by huge kilometer, and they have different regional challenges in their own region. Thank you very much.
I would like to answer your question from the very well-known dynamics of international relations of Indo-Pacific. It is, the relations in Indo-Pacific, interstate relations. There is a significant term that has been used. It's called compartmentalization. But this is only the first part of my answer. I also have a second part. In the first part of my answer, if you can follow up the interstate affairs in Indo-Pacific, countries in the region, they can successfully compartmentalize issues. In other words, they don't let certain issues to contaminate the issues that could be very lucrative. A very good example is the relationship between India and China. If you can look at the relations, they've got problems. Border problems, boundary problems, significant issues, territoriality. But if you look at their affairs in trade, commerce, it's not the case. So that type of compartmentalization helps two very significant powers of the region to work together, regardless of the issues that they have. And they are national interest issues. So that's the first thing that I can say about Indo-Pacific that enables the actual parameters of outgoing relations in the region actually, enables that. Second one, I put forward three elements in my speech, which is being like-minded, the importance of international institutions, and also international law. All those three are about the platforms that these two countries actually work on. International platforms also help the countries to eliminate, or if you may, to dilute the spiky issues that they can actually damage the relations. If you are dealing with an issue from the perspective of international law or an institution which relies on international law, your national interests or the, how may I say, the mismatch of your national interests lose their significance because your objective is going to be different. And international law gives you the parameters so that you can achieve that objective by putting aside the inconsistencies of your national interests. So from that point of view, focusing on the national interests is pretty much like a neo-realist attitude, which is not much of a value in today's international relations. Türkiye and Indonesia type of countries, like certain proactive middle powers. I think one of the speakers used like the term major powers. We can use that. Obviously, they are not lesser powers. For them, there are so many other platform-oriented objectives and parameters that they should follow, rather than an old-school neo-realist, inconsistency.
Also, to just add some of the questions to the respond to the questions. Since you are in international relation, in international book, there is a notion that if you want to stimulate cooperations, those two things you need to have: proximity and shared interest. But it doesn't necessarily must be on that way. Proximity and shared interest happens by ASEAN, in ASEAN. I mean, Indonesia in ASEAN, we have like concentric circle in ASEAN. Our first priority in international relations, that's because we are in a proximity setting. And we also have a shared interest. But it doesn't mean that Turkey, 1,000 miles away from Indonesia, we don't need to have and stimulate cooperation with Turkey because this country is far away from Indonesia. But I think even in the question of proximity, we still have the same interest, a shared interest with Turkey. It's like a couple the speakers said about the middle powers. So when it comes to stimulating cooperation among nations, if you don't have proximity, at least you have shared interest. Ideally, if you have both, that will be very good. But if you have one of them, then you can utilize any one of them, either with the proximity or with the shared interest. Yesterday, we also discussed about things like Antarctica. It's very far away from Indonesia. But I think Indonesia should pay attention to Antarctica as well. Even it is not really pertaining to our interest, but I think as a nation where we are very much rely on, climate change, Antarctica plays pivotal role on balancing those kind of climate change. We have the attention on Arctic continent, but in Antarctica the same. So again, when you want to develop or stimulate cooperation among nations, those two requirements need to have, but either one of them is enough, with proximity or with shared interest. Thank you.
Very brief, but I couldn't help but think of the current.
It's your first sentence.
Okay. No, the joint production that we have on I think Prof. Banyu will speak about this tomorrow from the defense side, but we already received and we already have mutual benefits in it because the format of like-minded partnership is when we jointly produce our defense equipment. It's under joint production principles where technology transfer happen and skills exchange happen might not happen with other countries that might be more reluctant to do so, and middle powership is there. And second sentence, save it for later.
Thank you. Please.
Sorry, thank you. I don't have any question, but I would like to give you a great information about the future of the Turkey and Indonesian partnership. Actually, we are expecting, His Excellency, you were telling us the direct flight from Turkey to Indonesia. Actually, it might happen in near future because we are expecting to Ankara about like more than 4,000 Indonesian. With the help of the COM project, as you know, we signed 2 months earlier. So with the COM project, we are expecting more than, it's actually approximately 1,000 engineers and technicians to Ankara. So we are going to help Indonesian people for the technology transfer. You were telling us some technology transfer. So we are going to increase your, actually we are going to shift your learning curve to the right with the help of the COM project. And with the help of them, when we are hosting them in Ankara, 1,000 people means with their families, we are expecting more than 4,000 people, because right now what we signed is approximately 1,000 engineers and technicians. They will come for the COM project, and they will work with us as a Turkish engineers. We are not going to hide anything from them, and with the help of them, probably in near future. So you should start studying because technology will help them for the Indonesia, since you have some defense criteria over there. So you will be the game changer country in your area. So there are 2 good news. One, for our professors, you might start working the effect of these 4,000 people in Ankara with the COM project. What will you see in the region in 10 years? Because in 6 years, we're expecting 4,000 in Ankara, and they will go back to Indonesia. And not only COM will be flying in Indonesia, but also 4,000 people will take our Turkish culture to bring everything to Indonesia. So I will just, add this great information to your studies. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I praise your information. I mean, this is the kind of cooperation that not easily be found in different form of cooperations, especially in technological aspect. When you have the cooperation for the aircraft, the sensitivity of the technology, the IPR, intellectual property right, sometimes becomes the hurdle of this cooperation. And you just heard from our partner from Turkey, in fact, like 4,000 engineers from Indonesia. Imagine that those 4,000 engineers from Indonesia coming back to Indonesia and develop as a hub for Turkish product and technology in Indonesia, a gateway to ASEAN, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. So the implication is very huge, and I welcome that. And I think that's a very big news that I can bring home. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Last question. That lady, please. Aisha.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Sharifa Umaira. I'm political science student at Ankara University from Malaysia. So first of all, thank you for all the panels for sharing your insights. It's really meaningful. My question will be directed to Ms. Cheney because you talk a lot about the future generation. So my question will be, in the current situation, we realize the foreign policy of Indonesia and Turkey is really different. Like the approach of Indonesia is more on non-alignment, non-intervention, and Turkey is more focused on like the middle power is more competitive within their region. So your point of view in the current situation of the younger generation in both countries, how will they shape the future of the foreign policy with bottom-up approach, and how it will encounter and face the challenge that we encounter in our world right now? Thank you.
Not 2 sentences this time. Thank you for the question. But first of all, I'd like to contest the idea of our foreign policy when you mentioned we are very different in our foreign policy. But I do see more, well, I shed more light on the similarities than the differences, where when we see Turkey, although part of NATO, it has different posture when it comes to dealing with the Russia-Ukraine war, rejecting to impose sanctions, and sort of playing this quote-unquote, I quote from Professor Mithat, I need to mention, delicate balancing act. And so it sort of have the same ideas with our foreign policy in Indonesia. Again, like-mindedness is there. But the second question, when you say how we can work together bottom up, then this is my favorite question, because then we can talk about how do we translate trust and political fondness from leadership level to the broader public and societal engagements. And this is where civil society, think tank, academia, universities come in, because without them, then we don't have the we can't fully optimize what we have in between each other. And again, I need to reflect on Australia, because I just literally did my research on that. We were neighbors, Indonesia, Australia. Indonesia and Turkey is very far away, as somebody mentioned. But then when we talk about bottom up, our problem with Australia is it's very difficult to translate trust and political fondness to the societal level, and hence underweight trade and investment. We're not even in the top 20 of investment partnership with from Australia's side, and our trade is just stagnant if you look at this share. And you know, they're trying to sort out what happened and how can we make it better. And what they did, this is the solution that we can probably apply, is that first, they appoint a business champion to Indonesia. It's like a institutional arrangement. And second, they form a new trade deal team, where it facilitates the prospects of trade and investment, and facilitates the business people who have different cultures and different ways of doing business, the uncertainties that they might find in Indonesia, and so on. So these agencies, institutionalization of agencies, and probably individuals' appointment that needs to catalyze what we have across the border. And similarly linked to the previous question, then what we can do together despite being so far, while being like-minded. We're already like-minded despite our probably strategic outlooks difference. But the point of convergence, again, is we both want to diversify our economic relations. We both probably want to diversify our defense partners. And there are always rooms for convergence if we really want to tailor it. And so that's what probably we can say for now.
Okay.
10 sentences.
Thank you. Time is over. So before I close the session, I would like to thank to all our distinguished panelists, and also I would like to thank you for your participation and patience. The organizing committee invites you to the lunch, and traditional Turkish and Indonesian foods will be served in the lunch, and the staff will guide you to go to lunch hall. Thank you.